The following is a presentation of the Retro Network.
Hello, SequelQuesters. This is a SequelQuest Rewind. Diving back into the archive to September of 2018, this is episode 85, an A-Team movie sequel.
Welcome to SequelQuest, the podcast where Adam, Jeff, and Jeremy invite you on a cinematic journey to create prequels, sequels, and reboots to your favorite movie franchises. Joined by special guests along the way. SequelQuest is go for launch, so let the adventure begin now.
In 2015, a crack podcasting unit began pitching crazy ideas for films they couldn't create. These men promptly began recording these fake movie pitches for maximum ridiculousness, hoping to get noticed by the Los Angeles underground film scene. Today, still committed to creating prequels, sequels, and reboots, they survive as podcasters of fortune. If you have a sequel idea, if no one else cares to listen, and if you can find them, maybe you can inspire the SQ team. Listen up, fools! Tonight we are bringing you explosive podcasting action, but to accomplish this mission, I had to assemble a team of highly skilled individuals. First up, the man who has repeatedly told me he ain't getting on no plane. It's B.H. Campbell Smith. B.H. stands for Big Huge, aka Jeff.
Thank you. Hi.
And released from a mental hospital just in time to pilot this show directly into your ear holes, I'm Howlin' Mad Adam. And, Jeremy loves it when a podcast comes together, but he's been taken hostage by the insurgent military of a South American dictatorship, so it's up to us to save today. But we can't do it alone. So, charming his way onto the team tonight, he's no Dirk Benedict, but he's definitely a face man. Returning to the show on loan from the Nerd Lunch, Down the Rabbit Hole, and Dragonfly Ripple podcasts, it's Carlin Trammel. How you doing, CT?
Hey, so I'm no Dirk Benedict. Does that make me Tim Dunnigan?
We gotta get into that.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh, there's some details. But yes, in case you haven't guessed, tonight we are talking about the A-Team from 2010, starring Liam Neeson, Bradley Cooper, Sharlto Copley, Quinton Rampage Jackson, Patrick Wilson, Jessica Biel, and directed by Joe Carnahan. Now, the reason CT is joining us is that he is a super fan of this movie, and we're going to get into those details. Jeff, you are a super fan of this movie?
I didn't know. I thought that was a contradiction. Now, that's an actual thing, that there were people that saw that paid money for this movie? Well done. Well done.
Unfortunately, not enough. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this episode right now.
That's a good point.
We would be on our 7th sequel.
Oh.
But the truth is, we can't talk about the movie without getting into the action-adventure TV show that ran for 5 seasons from, 1983 to 1987 on NBC?
Yep.
So, CT, were you watching the show during its original run?
For a good chunk of it. I think when it debuted, just the first couple seasons, I missed it. I wasn't watching it, but I had friends who watched it. I was aware of it, certainly because of the merchandise. So when it debuted, I lived in the Eastern time zone, so it was kind of past my bedtime, actually, for the age I was. We moved to the Central time zone in the midst of this series, and then I was all in. I was like, okay, now I can watch it, and I love this show. Until that last season, then I didn't love it as much. And even that, I feel like initially had some potential, and they just didn't carry it through.
How about you, Jeff? Were you an A-Team watcher?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm too young to have watched it when it's first run, because, again, I was like 5 when it came on. So, but definitely the reruns. I mean, it was the one that I feel like A-Team's reruns were always at like 3 o'clock. So by the time I got home from work or from school, I would only catch the last 10 minutes of it. So it was always that dream of if someday I can get home in time to watch all of A-Team. Because I would end up. I'd get to watch Quantum Leap and I'd get to watch MacGyver and whatever, which was great, but it was just A-Team was the dream because, and to be perfectly honest, the reason I'm so harsh on the movie is because of my love for the TV show. The TV show is everything the best of 1980s television. And then, to have a movie that just, it's almost impossible to capture that, I think, in a movie form.
Yeah, we're going to get into that for sure. Now, for me personally, I knew the A-Team as a cultural touchstone. I also did not watch the show during its original run. I watched it in syndication in like the early 90s. But I specifically remember catching the episodes where Hulk Hogan was a guest star. So that was a big deal to me, because Mr. T also was front and center in the promotion of the original WrestleMania. He was very involved, so there was a lot of synergy between the WWF and the A-Team,
There's a very gimmicky fourth season. They started having like Hulk Hogan's in a couple episodes. The Fridge is in one of those. You got Boy George is in an episode. Rick James is in an episode. So that fourth season was like, let's get in guest stars. Wheel of Fortune. There's a Wheel of Fortune episode, which is actually really funny. The fourth season was like, we're out of ideas. Let's just do gimmicks.
Yeah, well, and I find it so interesting, doing a little research, Stephen J., is it Cannell?
It's Cannell.
He created the show, but after he was fired from ABC because he hadn't produced a hit show for that network, they kept trying. So then, the great Brandon Tartikoff over at NBC basically gave him this idea for an action show. You kind of talk about Dirty Dozen, giving him a lot of inspiration. And then there you go. He's off to the races with a major hit. Kind of like you said, CT, maybe for 3.5 seasons. I don't know. For I guess the fourth season, star-studded at least. But I think it's interesting to look back also at where the actors that make up the A-Team came from. Because they are a very motley crew when you consider their pedigree in television and film. Like, if you think about George Peppard before the A-Team, what do you know him from?
Breakfast at Tiffany's is probably one of his bigger roles.
Right.
And then he was in some sort of detective TV series called Banachek in the late 70s, which is kind of a weird show to watch.
Did he star in that, or was he like a co-star?
He was the star. He was Banachek.
Oh, okay. Because I've heard of the show, but I've never seen it. And then, you got Dirk Benedict, who was on Battlestar Galactica.
Who almost wasn't in the show. Tim Dunedin was in the pilot as Face, and Dirk Benedict was almost not in the show. I guess they wanted him, but then for some reason, somebody along the way said, no, he can't be in it. Dunnigan was not loved in the pilot, and they brought Benedict in.
Yeah, he didn't have nearly as much charisma.
They said, someday we'll need Captain Power.
And then, you got Dwight Schultz, but when you look at his IMDb, he was just like barely getting started as a character actor on TV. He was doing like Chips and shows like that, kind of one-off performances. And of course, after the show, Star Trek fans love him. But we all know also that the real breakout star of all this was Mr. T. So, CT, for you, as you were getting into it, did you find Mr. T first from the A-Team, or did you find Mr. T from Rocky 3? Also featuring Hulk Hogan, by the way.
Yeah. I was aware of Mr. T from the A-Team. I actually didn't watch the Rocky movies for quite some time. I knew of them, but didn't watch them for years. So I was more aware of Mr. T from the A-Team, though he still wasn't my favorite. I was always a Hannibal fan, even growing up.
Oh, interesting. Okay. How about for you, Jeff?
Well, I'd say, like, awareness-wise, like, as a kid, I remember, what was it, Mr. T and the something All-Stars? But, yeah, whatever, the Saturday morning
T-Team.
Yeah. T-Team. And to be perfectly honest, for a while, I didn't put the two and two together to figure out that actually was the same character, that I kind of got to know that. Because Mr. T just became like the, ultimate, not even action hero. I don't even know what you would call him. He was just the icon that was around.
Well, he was like tough guy, but kids loved him. Like, he was like scary to adults, but kids were not afraid.
Why we liked him. Well, it's funny because I'm the same way, where Mr. T, even as a kid, like, Mr. T was never my favorite character. I feel like Face would have been my favorite as a kid. But yeah, Hannibal's still the best one, though.
Wow, interesting. Okay, yeah, because for me, Mr. T, I would say, was really the main person you tuned in to see, and I also big fan of the cartoon show with his young gymnastics team cohorts. And I think that was actually Phil Lamar's first job, if anybody knows the great Phil Lamar. But also, I recently went on a very fruitful garage sailing, yard sailing adventure, and I managed to pick up not one but two Mr. T gym bags inspired by that cartoon from 1984. It was awesome.
Why do you need two of them?
There were two available, and I wasn't walking out of there with just one. Oh, they're beautiful, beautiful. They got the cartoon Mr. T on there. And that's what's so funny is, like, you know, after the A-Team, he really became a marketing icon. That was kind of his thing. Like, he had the cartoon, he had his cereal, of course, and then next thing I know, it's the 90s, and he's doing 1-800-COLLECT commercials telling us to cut the jibba jabba. And I thought he disappeared after 1-800-COLLECT, but apparently he still does commercials, he does reality TV.
He was on Dancing with the Stars, and he came out and danced to the A-Team theme song.
Whoa. And
how he did not win on the spot, I don't know. I
no
do.
Soul.
I in my mind imagined that it was actually like some sort of plot of the A-Team, like it was like that was actually PA who had to go out there as a part of the plan to save the dancer or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy too is he, like I said, his voiceover work he's done the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatball movies. I don't know if you guys have watched those, but my kids love them. And I had no idea that he was the goofy cop character, because that's like a legitimately funny performance with levels. Like, it's good. But CT, you made reference also to the merchandising, because this show, had lots of violence. It was famous for non-lethal violence, right?
Yes.
Cars are being blown up, you're getting people shot with machine guns or shot at with machine guns, but nobody would die. There was no blood, or, at least you didn't get confirmation everybody was dead. They just fell down.
Very few. There were some deaths, but they're very few and far between on the show.
Yeah, and so, but it was wasn't it targeted sort of by like parents groups and things, just because it was essentially marketed to kids? I mean, it was almost like considered a family show in a way.
Yeah, it debuted after the Super Bowl. It was really targeted prime time. Definitely, kids were jumping on it. There were action figures, and I have an A-Team lunchbox, and there was the die-cast toys and rack toys and all that stuff. I mean, there was no shortage of all that merchandising.
Yeah, and I went on eBay just to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive, because I was curious to kind of see, okay, what is out there? What did they produce? And like you said, action figures, whatever there might be. But one of the craziest things I found was a hilariously cheap A-Team dress-up kit. Okay. Oh. And so, like, each member of the team, there was a specific item in there associated with them. Like, Hannibal's disguise kit was a pair of Groucho glasses. BA had a canteen for some reason. And then for the female member of the team, Amy, they included a, quote, real working flashlight. Oh. Wow. Which I have a few more I want to mention, but let's talk also about Amy. Because you have this character who is kind of like the audience introduction to the A-Team, right? She was front and center in the marketing as any other star on the show.
She's on my lunchbox. She's right there on my lunch. Well, Mr. T, BA, is huge on the lunchbox. He takes up half of it, and then the rest of the cast are pretty prominent on the other half of it, including Amy.
But it was definitely a guy's show, and so to have this woman in the middle of it always felt kind of odd. Just, in concept, it's good, but at the same time, if you think of the A-Team, nobody thinks of 5 characters, they think of 4 characters.
Well, she was only really in the first season and a half. But
did they bring in another female
actor? And then they tried to replace her, and Tanya was the second the reporter character, and Tanya was very, very short-lived, like just part of the second season, and then one episode or 2 episodes in the third season. She was kind of in and out.
And then Tia Carrere came up in like the 4th or 5th season, didn't she?
Tia Carrere is only in 1 episode. She was supposed to join the cast, and then was supposed to be in the 5th season, and something happened, and she she didn't wind up joining the cast.
Yeah, because I knew she was set up. I was like, Cassandra from Wayne's World? That's awesome. Philando. Okay. So I just thought it important to mention these female characters that just for whatever reason didn't stay in the mix, really weren't remembered.
Well, there was just to peel back the curtain, there's a lot of misogyny going on in the background. George Peppard did not want women on the cast, so he basically drove both of them away. Okay.
Creating the friction.
Yes, there's a lot of friction. If you read up about the behind the scenes, there's a lot of friction, and most of it's Peppard.
Oh, okay. A prickly character.
I can't say I'm surprised. Disappointed, but I can't say surprised.
But there was all sorts of stuff. Like I said, it's interesting that such like an action-packed show, because like later on, I guess things got a little more serious, stuff like Miami Vice, and it's like kids shouldn't be watching that. But this show was a little more tame, but at the same time, I think it's funny because aside from, say, like, Topps trading cards or party supplies or a B.A. Baracus AM radio, there were branded boomerangs? Like, what? 18 boomerangs? And probably the funniest of all, it's an A-Team grenade toss kids game. So it's like a beanbag toss, but with hand grenades. It is amazing. So it's just like, they really tried to keep at least with the theme. I feel like if nothing else, they didn't miss out on what was possible. Jeff, did you ever go so far in your dream of being an A-Team watcher to find anything in your toy box?
No.
Yeah, now I know I had an A-Team stamp, just a little ink stamp that was BA's head. So I had a Mr. T stamp, and then I had a Mr. T kite. But I think also the Mr. T kite was for the cartoon and not for the A-Team proper. But so the other thing, and CT, I know you have a copy of the novelization, right? Or of all the novelizations, right? There were 3 of them?
There's six of them.
Oh, wow. Okay. I only have the first one. It has a little page in the back that's promoting the other 2 in the series. So I guess it must have been so popular they had to add more.
Yeah, well, there may be, actually, that's a good point. I have 1 through 6. There might be more than that, but I have the first 6, yeah.
Have you cracked the spine on any of them?
I have not read them, no, if that's what you're asking. The spines might be cracked. They were purchased used, but
okay. You're not responsible for that.
Yes.
In honor of your co-host on Nerd Lunch Packs, I decided I'm going to read this novelization just so I'm aware of it. And it's a pretty faithful retelling of the pilot episode, but it also brought out to me some of most 80s television has this, especially that which has like a lot of machismo, but there's some troubling things that are a part of this, like Hannibal's Mr. Lee, stereotypical Asian character. That's kind of going back to Breakfast at Tiffany's, like the Mickey Rooney Asian stereotype, and Murdock talking in a bad Mexican accent all the time, and then there was one, particular scene where 2 characters are teasing each other about coming out of the closet. I don't know, was that it? Was that in the pilot? Did that get filmed?
I don't recall that being there, but
yeah, that must have been added by the author or original script. But this is the other thing I was going to ask about Face, getting back to the original Face Man, because he's the only character, at least in the book, that gets a real backstory, where it talks about him being like a street kid who was raised by a Catholic priest and all that. Was that part of his mythos on the show?
Yeah, he's an orphan. So I was going to ask, because there's a scene in the pilot where he meets up, and I guess I thought it was his dad, but maybe it's like the priest who raised him or something like that.
Yeah, in a hospital.
So is that in the novelization?
It is, yeah. Okay. So that was my question to you, because it's been a while since I watched the pilot. So I was like, okay, so that makes sense then. So a juggernaut of ratings. Everybody loved it. There was even a live action stunt show at Universal Studios in 1985. Quickly replaced by the Miami Vice stunt show.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
You do?
Oh, yeah. I remember the A-Team one. They used to have, because even after they canceled that, they still had the A-Team van there on display for years.
Yeah, I remember seeing the van for sure. And you know what was actually pretty fun? I'll just mention this as we close out on the show. So I'm a big fan of RetroCon. Anybody who loves old TV, old toys, anything, you got to find yourself at RetroCon every year. But last year was the big guests that they had were, Faceman and Murdock. So you had Dirk Benedict, and he was there, looking good, and Dwight Schultz was there as well. And I was not like a diehard A-Team fan, but my cousin's family, who I invited to come with me, were. Like, their kids, were like 10 and 12, and they had just watched all the seasons on Netflix, so they were way into the A-Team. So they got their picture in front of a replica van, with Murdock and with Face, and so they were very excited. Yeah, I'm curious, do you hear, CT, ever that Mr. T is out there? I've seen, like, signed boxes of cereal and stuff, but does he go to any cons that you're aware of?
I don't know if I saw him at a con years ago, but I don't know if he's doing it anymore.
Okay. So we talk about the show, and the show is gone, and apparently for years and years they were trying to get a movie made, like going all the way back to the 90s. They're like, we could do this, we could make an A-Team film, and it just never worked out until finally we get the announcement in 2009, I think, is when stuff started leaking, right? When they had like set photos of everybody filming in Canada, of all places. And what was your first impression when you heard there was going to be an A-Team movie, CT?
I was very worried, actually. And even though I like Liam Neeson, that doesn't necessarily save a movie for me. Phantom Menace. I like Bradley Cooper. At that point, I didn't know who the other guys were. Jessica Biel didn't, I knew who she was, but she didn't save it for me or anything. So I was just very worried about it. Being such a fan of the show, there's so many TV shows that are turned into movies where they start kind of doing like, let's make fun of it. Like Starsky and Hutch comes to mind, where it's like, this is a serious show and now you're poking fun at it. Or Chips has done that more recently, or 21 Jump Street more recently. And sometimes it works. Sometimes it's fine. And this time is like, I didn't want that to be the case here. So I was nervous about that. I had read a leaked script treatment from before where they had actually made Face the villain of the piece. So knowing that was a possibility, I was worried about that. So I was very trepidatious about the whole thing.
And Jeff, again, you said you were a devoted fan as well. Was your sentiment similar?
Yeah, I mean, like, not devoted fan per se, other than just I certainly appreciated the show. So yeah, I felt that same way. And it's that frustrating thing. I mean, it's gotten more frustrating since then, where it's just like, it feels like Hollywood is incapable of coming up with original ideas. So they just want to rehash creative ones from the 80s. And yeah, very, very rarely does it seem like that turns out successful.
Yeah, well, see, for me, like, I remember hearing about it, but I had no real interest in it. I just thought the casting was strange, because Liam Neeson, for me, I've never been a fan of his American accent, going back to Darkman and everything else. Like, he just never quite has it. Yeah.
I don't know why I'm still surprised at your movie rep. Well, he was fine in Darkman, but,
Okay, I could go all the way back to High Spirits with Steve Guttenberg.
No, see, this is not getting better, man.
But also, the one that I was interested in that actually fascinated me was Sharlto Copley, because I loved District 9. Jeff, I know you're a fan too, right?
Yeah, well, Judy's even bigger fan, my wife, but yeah.
Yeah, and so him as Murdock, I was like, that's really interesting. I don't know where he's going to take it, but I never thought he would work again, except in a Neil Blomkamp film. I thought that he would be his guy, that he just, cast and everything. And then here he was in a major blockbuster, or, supposed blockbuster. And so I only saw the first 15 minutes of the movie at my dentist's office. She is an aspiring screenwriter herself, Dr. Bott, you rock. But she always would let me pick a DVD to put on during my cleanings, So one time I saw the A-Team, I was like, oh, I gotta throw this on. But like I said, I only saw the first 15 minutes, and then I was like, it's all right, but I don't know if I'm gonna go back to it until this show came up and CT's request that we give it a chance, bring it back into the spotlight. And I have to say, I've watched this movie 3 times in the last 2 weeks. Ow. I watched the theatrical and the extended cut, then the theatrical with the director's commentary. And you know what? I'm still not tired of it. The actors in this movie are charming. The action is fun.
Yep.
It's great.
It's
a fun movie.
Sorry, Jeff. It is so good.
Yeah. See, for me, it's like the problem that I have with it is that I saw it and I enjoyed it, but it was just like, meh. Like there was just nothing, because if you ask me, I think all of the characters that they cast, like all of the actors they cast, Liam Neeson doesn't work for me. He's no Hannibal, and especially because he's my favorite character. That one was tough. Bradley Cooper, great face. You know, again, Murdock, an interesting choice. Even Rampage, I thought Rampage was pretty good. My problem was, personally, I felt like the four of them had almost zero chemistry. I didn't feel like that charm that the first one had, where it was just like, I feel like this is almost like a group of friends. Even the banter between BH and Murdock, like, I loved that in the original show, and at least for me, that's what didn't work in this movie.
Wow. See, I have to disagree, because I think that's the strongest point of the film. That's what you go into it. You're like, wow, these guys really work together. The chemistry is great. And Jeff, I would recommend, if you ever decide to give it a chance again, the extended cut has so much more character development and time for you to see them interacting together, where you really feel it, especially like the first meeting between Hannibal and BA and all this stuff. Like there's a lot of good moments in there, and a lot of extra comedy as well. So I think the theatrical cut does kind of skimp on that to jump from action scene to action scene, but at the same time there's plenty to work with there. I feel like, in addition to the villains, I feel like the villains of the movie, you know, Patrick Wilson is great. He's just a super, you know, frat boy jerk, you know, whatever. He's just a different kind of villain. Even at the end, when he's caught, he's still really just full of himself, which is hilarious. CT, what are some of your favorite moments from the movie?
Well, the tank scene is a classic. I think it's classic. It's just so absurd. It's so like A-Team turned up to 11, where they have stolen a plane. BA's like passed out. Murdock's going crazy. They're being chased, and now this plane is carrying tanks, and so they're going to get blown up. So they then drive the tank out of the plane and start using the tank as a means to slow their fall. And I thought it was just crazy awesome. I loved it.
Yeah. Unfortunately for me, that's the big climax, right? Like, that's pretty intense. And so to try to top that, they do a pretty good job at the end, where they're doing basically a shell game, guess where it is, with an actual shipping rig and crane. Like, that's pretty entertaining, but you just can't beat flying a tank. I mean, but I think once you see that, you're kind of all in. I think the other strength of the movie as well is that the film is told from the A-Team's point of view, and not kind of the outsider character like Amy was in the first season or so, you know, and like it feels like they were kind of like, oh, you know, we're going to get you into the world through this other person. I like that this is their story, and you're learning, you know, you're seeing everything through their eyes. You know, you get, you know, BA has quite a bit of, you know, back and forth, you know, where he has his nonviolent streak he goes into for a while. You get the explanation about the Mohawk and everything. I think there's just a lot of good building on what was there in the original series, but kind of pushing it a little bit farther, giving you a little bit more.
There's a lot of subtle nods to the original series. Like, even there at the end when BA's like not wanting to be violent anymore, that's a reference to the original series. Like, he doesn't want to kill anybody because they didn't kill anybody on the original series. Like, that's their way of explaining why they don't kill anybody. I'm like, that's beautiful. Like, you didn't need to put that in, but they did, because like they're trying to be faithful to the original show.
Yeah, and I mean, the sad part is, like, you don't really get participation from the original cast. I mean, George Papard had passed away, and Dwight Schultz and Dirk Benedict are in it, but not the theatrical version, really.
Those cameos are at the end of the movie, or like post credits.
Right. Yeah.
And then in the extended version, they're worked back into the movie.
Right, exactly. But they're barely there. I mean, it's kind of sad. And Mr. T didn't want to participate, really. But the greatest cameo for me was getting Gerald Mulroney, you know, one half of Simon and Simon, also Major Dad, as one of the villains, you know, as the turncoat general. Like, I thought he was great. It brought a smile to my face, getting like 80s TV icon in the mix, of everything. So
yeah, I mean, it worked.
So the other thing I thought was weird, though, is this is a 20th Century Fox production, right?
Yep. Was
it A-Team Universal? Like, it seems odd to me that Universal wouldn't have produced this film.
Yeah, I don't know how that all works. Like, if it was like Cannell Productions owned it, and then they could transfer that wherever. Because at one point, Top Cow Comics, like, they're somehow associated with this. Because at one point they had the rights to the comic, and they were going to produce the film, and so their names are still on this. And I don't know what that tie-in is, but
and Ridley Scott's an executive producer. I think both the Scotts, right? Wasn't it him and his brother? I think.
Is it the whole Scott-free thing or whatever?
Yeah, so it's really interesting just how it all came together. But there were, we talked about merchandising for the show. There was a little bit of merchandising for this. And CT, I know you own a couple action figures from the film.
There was a set of the 3 3/4 inch figures with the van. You could get all of the A-Team plus Patrick Wilson's character. And then there were taller Hannibal and BA, like 12-inch figures. And I don't have those, but I have the 3 3/4 inch set.
The bottom line is, I think it's a good movie. I think there's a fair amount of people that enjoy it if they see it. And I know the director, Joe Carnahan, has said, he's like, yeah, look, thanks for all the love for the film, but it just didn't make enough money, so there's never going to be a sequel. Like, it's just what it comes down to. Which is where we come in, right? If it had been given a second chance, maybe if it had hit at a different time, been promoted a different way, was it too early? I almost feel like, were we quite ready? It feels like right now was like peak 80s nostalgia boom, like in the last 2 or 3 years. And I feel like 2010 might have been just before that was really hitting hard. I don't know if you agree, CT or Jeff, but... So the idea is, if you brought it back now, if we gave it one more shot, what would we do with the A-Team? How do you excite moviegoers, get them there? So CT, why don't you give it to us? Tell us what you got.
Okay. Well, a couple things. One, when I was guest on your show before a few months ago, we did Flash Gordon together. And I practically wrote a script. I did not do that this time, which maybe you're all glad I didn't go this. I didn't fall into the Flash Gordon well is what I called it in January. I didn't fall into the A-Team well this time. So that's just I'll set that up. So what I like about this is, even though I wish we'd had sequels since 2010, is we're actually coming up on the 10th anniversary of the movie in 2020. And the original series pilot and first season took place 10 years after the events of their origin. So, in fact, the original intro for the first season says 10 years ago, a crack commando unit, blah, 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 blah. And then it was subsequently changed to 1972, da, 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 da. So 2020, we're at the exact point. Like, it's like, in my mind, they're actually waiting. The sequel can't be made until 2020.
All right.
So that said, I think it's perfect. We'll set this here in a year or so. Also, one other point about the 2010 movie is, while I do generally like Alan Silvestri, he can't come back for the sequel. We got to find somebody who's going to use the music, the original theme song, and not just kind of like as a one-off at the end, but like incorporate the theme throughout the movie. I don't get why he didn't, but whatever. Okay, so as I was thinking about this, as I mentioned, Hannibal's my favorite character. I love Hannibal, and I wanted to come up with a challenge for him. And one of the things I love about Hannibal is I think he is a perfect character. And a lot of times you see that's sort of an opposite. Like, you want to see a flawed character. Like, that's where we can really get to know their humanity and who they are, is when they're flawed. What I love about Hannibal is he's perfect. And there's so many episodes where they go through all this crazy stuff, and at the end, it's like, that was Hannibal's whole plan. That was his whole plan, was to get caught, because that was the only way he could solve the problem. And so I just have this idea that he is this like perfect mastermind, and he even kind of says something to that effect in the first movie. Give me 5 minutes, I'm good. An hour, I'm great. 6 months, I'm unbeatable. And so I want to build on that, but I still want to give him a foe that could come up to him and be potentially someone who could take him down. So as I thought about it, I said, who is someone in cinematic history or TV history or what have you that would be potentially Hannibal's opposite? Hannibal being this guy who's so crazy, but he's on the good side of crazy. He's so crazy he can plan all this out. And I thought of the Heath Ledger Joker from The Dark Knight, where he plans all this stuff out, but he's like just on the other side of crazy, where he's on the bad side of it. So I wanted to come up with basically a plot where it's Hannibal versus not actually Heath Ledger's Joker, obviously, but somebody who is that kind of character. So that's the direction I went with it. Now, that said, I don't think I'm clever enough to write this script, because what I really want is one of these things where you watch it once and then you're like, oh, I get it now, and then you watch it again with a whole new fresh perspective. So we would open on narration 10 years ago, you see all the clips, you get that recap out of the way, and then when that recap ends, we fade up on essentially what I would call the end of an episode. So they're in this small town and like rural California, and they're helping this small town out, and they're positioned throughout the town, ready to leap into effect once the motorcycle gang comes in to threaten everybody. And so that motorcycle gang comes in, and then BA crashes through a building with the armored tank they met out of, I don't know, farm equipment or something. And they take these guys down. It's just that quick action that sets us up. And then off in the distance, they hear sirens, and they gotta get in the van and go. And they notice they're in town. They all notice this reporter who's been following them around. And so they get in, they go, drive off, and you can tell at this point there's some friction amongst the team. It's been 10 years. They're tired of being on the run. At least Face and BA and Murdock's crazy, but he's kind of tired of being on the run and not having a means to settle. And Hannibal's just kind of taking it all in stride. But at the same time, as the movie progresses, Hannibal is slowly acting more and more erratic and almost kind of driving a wedge in the team to sort of drive everybody apart. And it doesn't make sense why he's doing that. In fact, he even says, I want that reporter who's been following us around, I want to meet with her. And they're all like, this is a horrible idea, we shouldn't do it, da-da-da. And he says, no, I want to do it. Oh, just as a side, the MPs that come in and follow them, it's Colonel Decker, who's played by Clancy Brown. I forgot to mention that. Clancy Brown's in this movie. So then we cut to a group of mob bosses. And one of them is holding a copy of the Los Angeles Courier-Express, and it's got a story about the A-Team published by Amy Allen on it. And they realize that these mob bosses have had smaller groups of theirs being picked off and taken down by the A-Team, and they'll recap some of these things that have happened, and it'll essentially be like they're describing episodes of the original series. And throughout this meeting, they're talking about all this stuff, and during this meeting, in walks Hunt Stockwell, and he's like, I can take the A-Team down. And it turns out that Stockwell, he was in the army as well, a little bit younger, and he was kind of being primed to be the next Colonel Smith. Like years ago, he was like, oh, he's just as good as Colonel Smith. He's going to be the next guy. And things went awry for him, and he was eventually dishonorably discharged. And now he wants to show he's better than Hannibal. So we cut back to the A-Team, and they go through the whole process where Amy's trying to meet with them. And they do finally meet with Amy, and Hannibal's like, you could be a useful asset. I'm going to tell our side of the story. They're going on a mission together, and this is his way of sort of getting some information out into the public. And things start as normal, but because this information's out there, their whole plan falls apart, and the team winds up kind of disbanding. And Stockwell then uses that point to make his move, because the team is vulnerable, and he starts kind of capturing them one by one. He comes up against BA, and he's able to take BA out. Comes up against Face, takes him out. So each of them get their own little scene, and they all each individually fail. He comes up against Hannibal at that point. Stockwell actually winds up seemingly dispatched easily, but it was all part of his plan to get captured. And so here we start having that whole idea of the dueling plan. So Stockwell's plans go into effect. Hannibal is able to use this to parlay a means to reunite the team. And this is where it starts getting very more nebulous. Stockwell has some more horrific thing he's wanting to do, blow up Los Angeles, something like that. Some crazy over the top scheme, and the team has to reunite to take out Stockwell. And as it all kind of comes together, you see that Stockwell's a genius, 10 steps ahead of everyone, but Hannibal knew all this was coming. He knew that eventually they would draw the attention of Stockwell. He knew that this is the route Stockwell would go. He knew that the big-time mob bosses would hook up with him, and this was Hannibal's way of getting to the big-time mob bosses they couldn't get to before. And he knew that this would draw the team closer together and reunite them and re-solidify their friendship. And so at the end, the team realizes that after all of this, we thought we didn't have freedom, but really because of what you do, because of your planning, there's nothing really keeping us down. We can go out and do whatever we want. We have true freedom that we wouldn't have otherwise. And they drive off into the sunset.
How about it? All right. Well, yeah, there's a lot going on there. So cool. All right. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, well, for me, and one thing that CT definitely brought up is that I love about the A-Team is kind of they have certain tropes that they always do almost every single episode. They got to do the montage building stuff with the theme playing. Hannibal's got to chew a cigar and say, I love when a plan comes together. There's certain things that, especially for fans, they got to throw us a bone with all those sort of things like that. So for me, not only that and wanting to definitely include those, but as with our previous episodes, whenever we're dealing with a source material that I love, I always say you got to stick with the source material. So I would want to adapt one of my favorite episodes, or one of the better episodes of the A-Team, Showdown. So basically the premise of the movie starts off with Jimmy John's Wild West show, which I guess doesn't happen a whole lot anymore, but nonetheless, it's being sabotaged by the A-Team. And so her name was Amy. I can never remember. Amy, Tina, what was their assistant's name?
Amy, who
it is Amy.
Wasn't her assistant. She wasn't their assistant per se.
Right, but her liaison or whatever she was. Right. Okay. So Amy gets wind of the fact that the A-Team appears to be sabotaging this Wild West show, starts to investigate it and finds out that that's not actually the A-Team. It's just someone impersonating the A-Team. So goes out to go and find the A-Team, which she thought had disbanded, to try and figure out what to do. So first goes to find Hannibal. Hannibal, as he is always undercover. So he's undercover as a hairdresser or something like that. She convinces him that he needs to get the gang back together so that they can clear their name. So then they go off to go find Face. Face is a bartender in the Bahamas somewhere where he can sleep with a different girl every night. So they convince Face that he needs to come back, and maybe an angry husband or ex-boyfriend or something like that comes after him, and that convinces him that, oh, okay, I need to leave. BA, of course, is working in a garage, fixing cars and doing stuff like that. And the fact that they have not recruited Murdock, I could certainly see them saying that, no, we don't need Murdock. Trust me, we're not going to get him. It's okay. That's what they kind of convince him. But of course, then they do end up finding Murdock. He's actually living on a South Pacific island where for some reason or other, the locals are worshiping him as a god. And but the A-Team shows up and BA ruins all that for Murdock. So then they all have to flee away from the Islanders. So they show up to the Wild West show, and as they're about to approach, they see that, was it Colonel Lynch that was tasked with finding the A-Team? He's there, and he's determined that he came out of retirement for this one last chance to find the A-Team. So they need to be a little bit more covert about it. So they all go into disguise to try and infiltrate this Wild West shows. That's the only way they can help him out, is from the inside. But of course, BA don't wear no disguises, so he has to just kind of be himself, but kind of in the background. So then they have, Face as a clown, and you've got Hannibal with a big mustache and stuff like that. And so they set up the whole thing while avoiding Lynch to try and flush out that fake A-Team. But they don't know where they are, so they have to wait. They set up a trap for him and stuff like that. They finally get them showing up. They go through a couple of different things, but finally they get them. They capture them. They find out, and there would be kind of a beat for seeing what the imposters look like, and they don't look anything like them. And so Of course, BA takes offense by it. In the show, originally, I guess they had no Murdock, which Murdock very much took offense to. Something along those lines. But then ultimately what would happen is they find out that this fake A-team was actually contracted by this guy who turns out to be a drug lord. And his whole plan was, I'm going to blame the A-team to take down this thing. They'll be so afraid because they've heard of this A-team before. They'll take that down. I'll be able to take it over and use it as in my drug smuggling. So then the A-team then has to run away because the drug lord, he's coming after them and stuff like that. And he's going to send all their goons to the Wild West place just to take it out the hard way and just kill everybody there and leave no trace, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we get a famous A-team montage as they're building all of their traps, because they had to leave everything behind because Lynch was there, so they don't have any of their weaponry or their guns or even their van or anything. So they have to convert all of these stage items and these fake pea shooters or whatever they're using in the Wild West show to try and stop these drug lords, which of course they do. Then they end up faking out Lynch there at the end as well. He feels like I finally caught the A-team, and it turns out that it's the A-team imposters instead.
Ripped from your television screens to the silver screen. Okay, that's good. So you're taking it back, full inspiration. That was the one thing I liked about the opening of the movie, is it very, it had kind of the Mexican setting, just like the pilot episode. So that was kind of fun.
So I should say part of my plot comes from the second season episode, Deadly Maneuvers. The whole idea of the crime lord so fed up with the A-team ruining their business that they wind up hiring somebody. That comes from an A-team episode.
Oh, okay. So, like I said, I watched the movie 3 times. I feel like I got the rhythm of the movie universe. There's got to be a personal edge in it for the A-team. You got to have a lot of comedy, and you got to have a couple giant action set pieces. And so here I give you A-Team 2, Burn. So, in flashback, we see a young Hannibal operating as a 2-man black ops unit with a highly trained partner named Ronnie Chase. But during one mission in Argentina, a terrorist group called Firestarter strapped a bomb to Ronnie and set him up as a hostage to be rescued. Spotting the deception, Hannibal seemingly left Ronnie for dead as the flashback ends in a bang. In present day, the team is starting to get a little antsy with their renegade lifestyle, and Hannibal is struggling to keep the team from going AWOL. Sounds familiar. Alright. Having been on the run for 5 years, Face claims he just wants to settle down with a beautiful woman. BA surprisingly wants to own a cattle ranch in Montana, and Murdock dreams of being the opening act for Celine Dion in Vegas, using the magic skills he's been working on in their spare time that is driving the rest of the team bonkers. Hannibal reveals that he has no one to get back to, that they are his family, but he promises that they will have their dreams someday and be cleared. He just needs more time. The internal strife is cut short, however, as the team kicks off their current mission, rescuing a wealthy American philanthropist who was aiding the poor of Russia and is now being held hostage by a team of heavily armed ex-KGB operatives who make a living through ransom money from kidnapped tourists. The A-Team infiltrates St. Basil's Cathedral, where the American is being held with Face posing as a blind priest to distract the bad guys, while Hannibal places explosive charges around the outside of one of the iconic spires. Hannibal jumps in the window to attack the kidnappers, while Face secures the hostage. Just as Murdock flies in on a borrowed Russian helicopter singing Russian opera and loops a massive chain around the spire so that when Hannibal sets off the charges, the entire spire comes free of the cathedral and is carried upside down by the helicopter across the Red Square like a bucket as the fighting continues within. But Murdock did not account for the weight of the spire, so the tip begins dragging on the ground and breaking apart with bad guys spilling out, while our heroes hang on for dear life. Finally, BA arrives on a horse-drawn sleigh to give the team a ride, explaining that horses handle better in the snow. As Hannibal, Face, and the rescued hostage fall into the carriage, last to arrive is Murdock, who exits the overworked helicopter at the last minute and lands on one of the horses just before what's left of the spire of the helicopter crash into the Moskva River. Arriving back in the U.S. after their mission, the team is captured by a woman named Sarah Hauser, played by Amy Adams, and her group of CIA operatives, who boast of having tracked the team over the last 12 months as they completed various missions for hire to make ends meet. She claims to have taken an interest after catching security footage of Face infiltrating a sweat house operation hidden within a youth center where they rescued child laborers. Sarah says she cannot clear their names, but agrees to look the other way and let them continue if Hannibal and the team will complete a mission that the CIA cannot, because it would create an international incident. The A-Team is tasked with recovering a prototype laser weapon which can target and kill up to 100 targets simultaneously, which was being field tested by the government when it was stolen 3 months earlier by a black arms dealer, and it is now going to be purchased by a re-emerging Firestarter terrorist organization during a ventriloquist artists convention in Las Vegas. Murdock is game, but Face and BA are against the mission, stating that it's too far outside their normal MO, which leaves the team open to failure. With Firestarter involved, Hannibal takes it as a personal vendetta and forcefully demands that the team accept the mission, which they begrudgingly do. Planning the infiltration while Murdock builds a snooty-looking dummy named Monsieur Merlot. The team takes their post at the designated convention center showroom, only to find themselves abducted and thrown into another room where all the exits are sealed. Once they get familiar with the space, all the team finds within is a single walkie-talkie. The voice on the other end is Sarah, who reveals herself to be the daughter of Hannibal's fallen comrade, Ronnie. She claims to have only joined the CIA to have access to the resources with which to track the A-Team and get vengeance for her father's death, exposing Hannibal's part in Ronnie's fate. The team show full distrust now in their leader, assuming it was just a matter of time before he turned on them. Sarah offers to let the rest of the team leave if they abandon Hannibal. Disgusted, they do just that, and Hannibal is left alone as Sarah enters the room. She appears ready to take her revenge out in blood, but then changes her tone, thanking Hannibal for allowing her father to die, since it set in motion her eventual rise to becoming the head of Firestarter. Hannibal explains that he knew Ronnie's mind had been poisoned, and that he had become a Firestarter operative, which is why he allowed him to take his own life on that last mission, and spent years after helping to dismantle the group's operation before forming the A-Team. Sarah reveals that she had been waiting for the A-Team's bond to weaken because all she wanted out of the capture was Hannibal's planning skills for the conflict to come, then offers him a place in the Firestarter organization to get revenge on the government that betrayed him, a chance to burn the country to the ground and start anew. Hannibal admits he was treated unfairly but never lost faith in the ideals of freedom. It's a pity that Sarah has worked so hard to resurrect a lost cause. Sarah shows Hannibal that her team is already set up undercover as security for a United Nations summit set to take place in 24 hours where the laser weapon will be put to use. It will strategically take out world leaders with the greatest military armaments, and since the device is American, it will frame the U.S. government for the action, causing these nations to launch violent strikes, which will decimate the country, leaving it open for new leadership under Firestarter. We cut outside to find the defecting A-Team members seemingly going their separate ways in different vehicles, but actually listening in on earpieces that are receiving transmissions from a mic hidden in a cigar in Hannibal's pocket. Did you really think they could be broken apart so easily? Each have reactions of disbelief, then determination, calling each other on radios from their vehicles to coordinate the rescue of their friend. Sarah then leaves Hannibal, giving him 30 minutes to change his mind about joining Firestarter before he will be killed by a hulking guard who looks ready to inflict pain. The trio soon realize that they were not actually given the clean break promised by Sarah, as Face, Murdock, and BA each have a tail to lose, a Firestarter operative that is looking to take them out. So before they can get back to Hannibal, they each take crazy drives in different directions. That part I haven't worked out, but stunts. For the Fast and Furious fans. They do ultimately find Hannibal, get him out of there, and the team ends up at the United Nations with minutes to spare, having figured out the targets programmed into the laser during a side mission where they intercepted Sarah in a Firestarter aircraft after having called Carissa Sosa to pull some strings for them and get a plane, blah, blah, blah. You know, there's more action in the middle. The major action set piece for the climax involves the team bungee jumping from the ceiling to grab each world leader before the targeting laser blasts them. All the while, Firestarter soldiers are arriving to intercept our heroes from above. The A-Team is successful at saving the world leaders, but then are surrounded by Firestarter forces while they try to escape. The plan was to dress up in U.S. military uniforms and make their way out. Sarah ultimately dies in a fiery explosion on top of the roof after actual U.S. military surrounds both Firestarter and the A-Team, but she busts out a grenade. The explosion provides enough distraction for our team to get away by finishing their change into military garb and exiting the scene in a military Hummer, with BA explaining he's going to have fun giving it a new paint job. So there you have it. The A-Team 2, Burn. So a few shades of CT's pitch there.
We
as
did.
well,
There was some similarities.
All right, gentlemen. So where do we fall on our votes? CT.
As I was saying, man, I wish at this point we'd had so many sequels. So I don't see why we couldn't take all of them and make them all just do like A-Team 2, 3, and 4, right? I mean, is that not an option?
Well, it's not generally how things run here, but I think
okay. If I have to pick one, I guess I'm probably gonna go. I do appreciate Jeff's going with like, hey, let's go with an original episode. I think there's a lot of stuff though there in Adams, and especially if I'm, there's like the crossover. We had some crossover ideas. I guess I'll ultimately go with Adams.
All right, Jeff.
Yeah, I think I'd lean towards yours as well, Adam. I feel like especially the starting off with the backstory with Hannibal, because ultimately, well, I feel like especially for both of you guys, you very much had Hannibal as kind of that central focal figure, which I think works really well. But I like, kind of that like backstory he kind of has to get over. I think works well with me. So.
All right. Well, I mean, I could just pull a Jeremy because at this point, 2 of the 3, it's unanimous. So I don't need to tell you who I would vote for. Everybody's a winner. They were great. But yeah, so let's get into that then. Is there something within there that you feel is not clear? Is there something that you feel needs to be expanded upon in my pitch?
So did Hannibal not know going into it that there was a setup? Like you said, he was wanting to take on the mission. Do you think he knew where it was all going?
Well, in my mind, yeah, because she says they've been tracking them for 12 months. My thought was that Hannibal figured it out along the way they were being watched. So he kind of set up and helped to get the guys on board with making it seem like they were discontent.
So as long as he was completely in control and always knew what was going to happen and not taken off guard.
Right.
That's how I figured it always works, but there's the back and forths, right? There's always the switcheroos. Right. There's a lot of that in the movie.
Right. And then where's the is there a building montage where they make things out of other things?
Well, that was supposed to be basically before they go to the ventriloquist convention, the mission that they supposedly thought they were taking on. That was going to be the montage where like everybody else is building different, equipment and weapons that they're placing, they're going to be ready to go. And, Hannibal, Face, and BA are in position in different parts of the building, but then they get captured and pulled into that room. But Murdock was the one who, while they're building equipment, he's building a ventriloquist dummy. So that's his, part of the montage.
Which is totally a Murdock thing.
It is, very much so.
Yeah, I thought he would have a lot of fun with that. So, yeah, so that's where that would be. So, yeah, but Jeff, thanks for calling that out, because that's important.
It's important to me, yeah.
What about, as far as, the Firestarter organization, did that plan seem too outlandish? That was my only thought, because I feel like the A-Team a lot of times seems to deal with smaller missions, that things that are important, but it's not like destruction of a country type.
That's the hard thing about a movie. With a TV show, it's it's the guy shaking people down for protection money. Well, and then the next week it's the guy shaking people down for protection money, and then the next week it's the guy shaking. It's pretty much the same level of street crime. But then when you go to a movie, it's like that. Does that work? Like you gotta kind of amp it up. So there is that obvious, like, okay, we have to have some sort of big government thing, James Bond the thing up, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think it's a hard line to follow. I feel like they did a pretty good job in the first movie with that, where it wasn't too crazy. I mean, there's still a level, but it was also the origin story. The first movie wasn't really your typical A-Team story.
Exactly, yeah, because that was kind of where I was falling into. I was like, because it really was them trying to figure out a way to clear their names by stopping the counterfeit money operation and all that. But even the counterfeit money operation, they say, well, that could destroy an economy or whatever. But it doesn't feel like life threatening immediately, that you would see. So this one's a little more intense. The other question that I had for you guys, because I wasn't sure like how it was going to be taken, but do you like the idea of a female villain? I mean, because we had like Sosa, Jessica Biel was kind of the antagonist, but she wasn't really a villain. She was still a good guy, but she was sort of causing problems for them along the way. But in this way, it's kind of all in on a female bad guy. Does that work for you?
Yeah, and I think we've seen that kind of character. Like, was it the second Kingsman? Julianne Moore was sort of the female villain in that, and I feel like we've seen that more. Like the female villain, was it actually Baywatch of all things, right? Didn't Baywatch have a female villain?
I was trying to remember. I saw that. It was actually much more hilarious than people gave it credit for.
It was not horrible.
It was not the worst thing I've seen.
Yeah. But I think you're right though. Yeah, she was like the mastermind behind it. Now I remember. Yes. So yeah, hey, take a page for Baywatch. Why not? They set the groundwork for us.
That's what you were doing. You were totally stealing
exactly.
From Baywatch.
Why not?
I'm changing my vote now. If you still from Baywatch.
So what do you think as far as casting then? Do you like the idea of Amy Adams finally having a good villainous turn? Has she had one and I just missed it? I feel like she's at that place in her career where she needs to diversify a little bit. Like, show us you can be evil, like still do all the nice roles you do. But
hasn't she like gotten to the point where she's not going to take? I mean, I guess she was still in Man of Steel and everything, wasn't she?
Yeah, she's in all the DC movies. Yeah, Lois.
Because I was thinking after doing like Arrival and stuff like that she's gotten to a certain point in her career.
But that's what I think. I think she's at the point where she would almost want to say, hey, you know what? Let me have a little fun here. And that's what I'm saying. I don't feel like she's gotten to, and she probably wouldn't chew the scenery, but she hasn't really gotten to dig deep into a devious persona too often. So I feel like just to show a different side. But can you guys think of someone else, another actress that you think would fit well in that role?
I don't know. I mean, like, Amy Adams, because I feel like it is good to have a villain, a recognizable villain. So, yeah, Amy Adams definitely has that part.
I mean, if you want to go like someone who's done like the military thing stuff, isn't Jessica Chastain? Isn't she like kind of in all that style of film? What was that military one she did? I'm blanking on it right now. Was she the Hurt Locker or was she in
Zero Dark 30?
Zero Dark 30, that's what it was. Yeah.
You could, you also have to think like it's the A-Team. So what? Like I was thinking like Sandra Bullock or Charlize Theron or somebody at that level, or even Julianne Moore, who I just mentioned. Like those are some actresses who could really do a good job at being a villain. But then, are they going to join the A-Team? I don't know.
Right. Well, and that's that thing too, where it's like it's almost that, because I would feel like Amy Adams, you kind of have the unexpected side, where I don't think the audience, so like maybe you would even play that up, where it's like you start off where you don't think she's the villain.
Right.
And then it turns out that she is. And
well, that's how it is, right? There's the back and forth. First she comes to him, she's like, look, I'm just doing my job, but I'll let you go if you help us out, Right. So she seems like she's on their side, and then the switcheroo, and then another switcheroo. I just feel like she just keeps going different levels of evil. Right. So I think, like, you're right. She would be a good choice because she could upset the expectation there. People wouldn't quite know. But also I feel like the trailers have to play up like the disintegration of the A-Team. Like that's what you would think this movie is about. And so there would be some element of that, at least in the teaser trailer, maybe to start, so a little bait and switch on you there too. You're like, oh no, it's a breakup movie? No. Not that everybody's super committed to this core group, second outing, but still.
So I talked about the fact that it's been 10 years since the first movie, or 10 years since the first movie. Did you either of you have that sort of in mind, like the fact that there had been so much time since the first movie? Does that play a role? I guess, Adam, you kind of talk about how they've been on the run for so long, but like, was that more of a factor?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing you were saying is, yeah, it's been 10 years, so they're really getting tired of it because it's like we're not getting any closer. And they're saying that. But at the same time, I feel like I would almost want to play it like that was planned for Hannibal, like, got them all to start complaining more. So we're buying it as an audience. But maybe by the end, we find out that's like kind of a resolution, is they've just accepted it at this point. They're like, look, it's been this long. This is our life now, and we're doing good. So what more do we need, you know?
Well, yeah, I was sort of ending with that idea too. It's like, we're actually better off this way. We're better because we don't have nothing. We don't have anything tying us down. We don't have the usual trappings of society. We're actually out there helping people more than we would be if our names had been cleared. And
the only thing I was going to say is, I had that area where, or, the section where Hannibal has that big guard, that's supposedly going to kill him if he doesn't agree to join before they break him out. And I was thinking, I wonder if we could get Mr. T for the fight. He didn't like the first one. This time around, we'll give him that cameo. And maybe we could do something with that. I don't know, but because we got the other guys in the last film, maybe he would finally agree for this one. Just
only if he can dance. He has to dance.
Well, that's during the credits. They should have just a dance party montage to like
dance, the Dancing with the Stars dance.
Actually, that would just be good if, like, at some point, like, they're maybe in a hotel room or something regrouping and they just flip it on and they see that. They're like, what are we looking at? Yeah, so, and I think, unless, Jeff, you feel that the problem with the film was the writer-director, I feel like Joe Carnahan was a good fit for this. I think he got the tone, at least in my opinion, pretty well. Like, it was balanced with the comedy and the action, and you were on board with them. Do you want to bring him back, or would you want to suggest somebody else?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the one thing that is a step in the right direction is, again, the A-Team is definitely a thing of tropes, and so throwing a good number of tropes in there is what the A-Team is all about. That certainly helps.
Yeah. Now, one thing I think is, just as we close here, I think it's important that for the marketing, they got to have, maybe this could go in with the dancing. Maybe Mr. T could just help promote by showing his dance skills. One of the famous phrases, and Hannibal's got in the book, it says Hannibal's got the jazz. Mm-hmm. But don't they use it, CT, in a different phrasing?
They use it throughout, primarily the first season, but it comes up the second season too, that Hannibal's on the jazz.
On the jazz. In the book it says got the jazz. So that's why I know, but on the jazz is the more popular phrasing. So I feel like that has got to be the hashtag on the jazz. And that, like, and there's got to be some campaign around that, so that's what's, setting the world on fire, is on the jazz, and people are interpreting it different ways, but then I don't know what it would be if it's like people submitting different interpretations of the original theme or something, but and everybody doing dance moves to their remix, so they're on the jazz. So just something along those lines.
Yeah, you got the social media campaign worked out. That's we're way far on.
Gotta get deep these days. Well, CT, want to thank you so much for joining us. Mm-hmm. Very cool, and it's important that we give all films a second chance, even those ones that have kind of just dissipated. I don't think this was ever considered a bad movie, but at the same time, it wasn't a super popular movie, and maybe we've given it a chance to be rediscovered. We've opened the door once again.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe enough people will find it in that Walmart discount bins that the sales will spike. And, man, it'll take off now.
I went digging for it in the Walmart bins. Did not find it. I had to use my Amazon bucks to buy a used copy.
Yeah,
my Amazon rewards.
$5 at the most?
Yeah, $5. Well, CT, why don't you tell people where they can find you these days?
All right. You can find really anything you need to know about me at nerdlunch.net. There is all the information about the Nerd Lunch podcast. We have on our feed now the Nerd Lunch podcast. Nerd Lunch presents Down the Rabbit Hole, and Nerd Lunch presents the Chap Report. So each of those shows are Nerd Lunch is twice monthly, and the other two shows are monthly. There's also a fifth week. If there's a fifth Tuesday in the week, we've got Nerd Lunch presents Fourth Chair Army Invasion, which is our Fourth Chair Army members taking over the show. So you can hear all the podcasts there. I have done articles, blogs, old blogs, new blogs. You can check out stuff about when I went to New York City this past summer. There you can find stuff that I sell. So I think last time I was talking about a King Thunder shirt from Quantum Leap. That is officially available through the Redbubble store. You can link to that. That's linked to from my site. I also have a Nerd Lunch University shirt, which, Adam, did you actually pull the trigger on that?
It's going to be in the mailbox tomorrow, and I'll just mention, if you're not sick of my voice, I am very excited to be returning myself to the Nerd Lunch podcast. I am a proud alumni of Nerd Lunch University, so keep an eye out for the 50 Cent Teen Titans episode.
That's right.
It's going to be very exciting.
That's I don't know how that will drop in relation to this episode, so look for Adam on our site. There's a Fourth Chair Army table and everything. You can look for all two of his appearances on Nerd.
Crossing my fingers for a third somewhere.
We'll try. All of it's there, and if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, it's at Nerd Lunch.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. Anything you want to plug?
I am not available anywhere else online. Sorry.
Find him here exclusively on the SequelQuest podcast. All right. Well, until next time, shut up, Murdock! Beautiful, beautiful. Shut up, Murdock. I actually thought I didn't know that, I love it when a plan comes together was his catchphrase. For me, didn't he also say like beautiful, beautiful while puffing on a cigar? Wasn't that also a Hannibal thing?
He would say that quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah, like that was the catchphrase for me. That's what I always thought was a Hannibalism.
His big grin as he was puffing on a cigar. I love Hannibal so much.
We thank you for listening to this episode of SequelQuest and invite you to continue the fake movie fun on social media. Submit your ideas for future episodes to sequelquestpod@gmail.com or SQPod on Twitter. The films and characters discussed on SequelQuest are the property of their respective studios and license holders. No copyright infringement is intended.
This has been a presentation of the Retro Network.